Ideas General Introduction to Pure Phenomenology by Edmund Husserl, first published in 1913. The principal ideas advanced in this work are that natural sciences are by nature dogmatic. The phenomenologist must undertake a critical study of the conditions under which knowledge is possible. To distinguish within experience that which experiences from that which is experienced, one must suspend natural beliefs. This suspension of belief is made possible by a method of bracketing, by which we talk not about trees themselves as items external to experience, but of the trees and the perceptions of experience. Noema, that which is perceived, is dependent upon noesis, the perceiving. But in noema, this has the kind of being peculiar to essences. The absolute forms of essences which owe their actuality in consciousness to acts of perceiving are ideae, eternal possibilities of quality related to other ideae by external relations. The term phenomenology, as it is used by Husserl and his disciples, designates first of all a principle of philosophical and scientific method. The usual method of natural science proceeds from a body of accepted truth and seeks to extend its conquest of the unknown by putting questions to nature and compelling it to answer. The phenomenological method adopts a softer approach, setting aside all presuppositions and suppressing hypotheses. It seeks to devise techniques of observation, description and classification which will permit it to disclose structures and connections in nature which do not yield to experimental techniques. It has been widely fruitful in psychology and the social sciences, as well as in epistemology and value theory. Husserl, in his logical studies of 1900 to 1901, did much to advance the general phenomenological studies, but he had in view a specifically philosophical application of the technique which many of his associates did not completely grasp or failed to share. Ideas was written with a view to clearing up the distinction between phenomenological psychology, which he regarded as legitimate but secondary, science, and phenomenological philosophy, which he was prepared to maintain is the foundation of all science. When a sociologist or psychologist conducts a phenomenological investigation, he puts aside all the usual theories and assumptions which have governed research in that field, but he cannot rid himself of all presuppositions, such as, for example, the belief in the existence of the external world, the constancy of nature. As Plato saw, every science must proceed upon some assumptions, except philosophy. To fulfill its promise, the phenomenological approach must bring us at last to an absolutely presuppositionless science. Pure phenomenology or phenomenological philosophy is, in Husserl's opinion, precisely that. It has long been the aspiration of philosophers to make their science an absolute one that rids itself of all presupposition and stands with open countenance before pure being. Husserl stands in this tradition. Phenomenology is not to be confused with phenomenalism, a name sometimes given to extreme forms of empiricism, such as that of Ernst Mach, which maintains that nothing is real except sense data. In fact, this is one of the misconceptions which phenomenology is designed to overcome. If the empiricists are right, the unity and order which we are accustomed to find in the world are not given in experience, but put there by the activity of the mind. Genetic psychology, which seeks to explain the origin of our various mental habits and responses, would therefore hold the key to understanding our whole view of the world. A good example is J.S. Mill, who, in his System of Logic of 1843, undertook to explain the force of syllogistic reasoning in terms of associationist psychology. Other positivists and pragmatists have attempted to give a psychological theory of knowledge and of valuation. Husserl argued, however, that the empiricists were wrong, that they did not come to their conviction about the absence of order and intelligibility in the pure data of experience by examining what is given there, but had it as an idol of the theatre, to use Francis Bacon's term. It follows that they have misconceived the task of psychology in supposing that it can discover in the mind laws which give rise to the meaning of the world, and that it is incumbent upon us to set about developing new accounts of logic, knowledge theory, aesthetics, and ethics, which stand on their own evidence. In place of psychologism, a misconceived psychology or science of the soul, what is needed if justice is to be done to experience is phenomenology, science of phenomena or appearances. Husserl takes his place then in the forefront of those 20th century philosophers who have sought to reaffirm the autonomy of various philosophical disciplines over against psychology. He was equally concerned to turn back the tide of the popular scientific view of the world, which he called naturalism. The particular sciences by nature are dogmatic, that is to say, they proceed without examining the conditions under which knowledge is possible. This is not to be held against them, but when anyone attempts to build a natural philosophy on the findings of the sciences, his uncritical procedure opens the way to skepticism, because the categories in terms of which we grasp natural events are unsuited to take account of conscious events, including the pursuit of scientific truth. It seems innocent enough to explain consciousness in terms of natural causes, until we recollect that matter and the laws which govern its behaviour are themselves part of our experience. This, according to Husserl, is the point which the philosopher must step in. His or her primary task, in fact, will be to distinguish within experience the part of experiences from the part that is experienced. There are many overtones of Descartes in Husserl's writing. The former philosopher, in order to escape from the ambiguities and uncertainties of our ordinary natural experience, developed a method of doubting. By bringing under question the whole phenomenal world, he laid bare a world of logical forms which he could not doubt. Husserl adopts a similar method. He talks of suspending our natural beliefs, including the fundamental conviction of every healthy mind that there is a world out there, that there are other selves, and so on. We are asked to alter this natural standpoint, to disconnect our beliefs about causation and motion, to put them out of action. This is, of course, only a methodological procedure in order to help us overcome our animal bias and make it possible for us to take a coolly intellectual view of things. Greek philosophy used the term epoche to indicate the suspense of judgment. Husserl presses this term into his service. To make his meaning clear, he uses the example of looking with pleasure into a garden where an apple tree is blossoming. From the natural standpoint, the tree is something that has a transcendent reality in space and time, and the joy of perceiving it has a reality in the psyche of a human being. But Descartes has reminded us that perceptions are sometimes. We pass, therefore, from the natural to the phenomenological standpoint, bracketing the claims of both the knower and the known to natural being. This leaves us with a nexus of exotic experiences of perception and pleasure valuation. We can now speak of the content and structure of the situation without any reference to external existence. Nothing is really taken away from the experience, but it is all there is in a new manner. In order to indicate this, the use of quotation marks is helpful. We can now speak of tree. These are all in quotation marks. Plant, material being, blossoming, white, sweet, and so forth. And be sure that we are talking only about the things that belong to the essence of our experience. Similarly, at the opposite pole, we can distinguish perceiving, attending, enjoying, and other ego acts. These each have their special characters and repay analysis. Husserl was at one time a student of Franz Brentano. 1838 to 1917, who had said that what distinguishes mental acts from non-mental acts is that the former invariably refer to something other than themselves. Drawing from the scholastics, he said that they are intentional. Husserl makes constant use of this discovery to designate the ego acts which are not limited to cognition, but include as well various attitudes such as doubting and supposing, as well as volitions and feelings. He uses the Greek word noesis, literally a perceiving, to designate the corresponding objects, for instance, tree, fruitful, charming. He uses the corresponding word noema, literally that which is perceived. An important part of the analysis of consciousness consists in tracing the relation between these. In each case, the noesis is real and fundamental, but noema is dependent and, strictly speaking, unreal. In our example, the perceiving of the tree is actual and constitutive of the tree perceived, but conversely, though it does not have reality, noema has being which is lacking to noesis. That is to say, it is composed entirely of essences, which are internally what they are and stand in necessary or a priori relations with each other. The same thing is true of volition and other modes. The valuing of the tree is a noesis. It has the same reality as the perceiving of the tree. Correspondingly, the value of the tree is noema. It does not have reality, but it has the same kind of essential being as the structure and properties have which make up the object of cognition. The value characters likewise take their place in an a priori system, together with other values. As long as our interest as philosophers is directed primarily toward the life of the mind, we shall be chiefly interested in exploring the various noeses. Husserl's delineation of these is subtle and perceptive, and goes a long way toward persuading the reader of the necessity of this descriptive groundwork, although, as is sometimes true of the drawings of a microscopist, we may have difficulty in recognizing in it the familiar features of the mind. His account of meaning, for example, should be studied by those who are interested in semantics, and his analysis of sentiment and volition provides an instructive approach to the question of the relation between emotions and values. One thing is common to all noesis, according to Husserl. All are at bottom thetic or postulational. Husserl speaks of them as doxa, Plato's word for opinion. This does not imply that some of our noesis are not characterized by certainty, just as others are characterized by a sense of likelihood or doubt, but in any case, it is what we commonly call a moral certainty. The conviction is the mode of the perceiving rather than the function of anything lying in the perceived. But in the present work, Husserl does not consider mental acts per se. He studies them because they provide the key to the various grades and types of objects which make up the noemata. For corresponding to perception then is the realm of colours, shapes and sizes, and corresponding to perceptual enjoyment there are dainty pink and gloriously scented. These qualities owe their actuality in consciousness to the noesis, but they are part of an order of being which is absolute and independent. Husserl calls all such absolute forms of or essences ideae. To avoid the ambiguities of such words as idea and essences, they are eternal possibilities, each perfectly definite and distinct from every other, but also linked with every other in a system of eternal relations. Thus, pink, white, green are species under the genus colour, and colour itself stands in a hierarchy of perceptual qualities. A similar hierarchical structure embraces the noema of value. Husserl, who began his philosophical studies as a logician, was preeminently interested in the grammar of meaning. He claims that on a very abstract level, all noema exemplify universal relations which can be formulated in a mathesis universalis. such as Leibniz conceived. But the theorizing logician does not do justice to the wealth of formal relations which lie before the phenomenologist. Its field is the analysis of the a priori shown forte in immediate intuition. The fixing of immediately transparent essence and essential connections and their descriptive cognition in the systematic unity of all strata in pure transcendental consciousness. It begins by distinguishing various regional ontologies, of which the formal region, exploited by the logician, is the only one. Material regions are numerous. The region of the physical thing will serve as an example. The question presents itself as follows. How are we to describe systematically the noesis and dormata which belong to the unity of the intuitionally presenting thing consciousness? Leaving aside the noetic factor, the problem is to analyze the essential connections by which appearances present themselves as one and the same thing. The analysis discloses that a mere res extensa is conceivable apart from the idea of a res materialis and a res temporalis. Yet as a matter of fact, the thing is, as presented to us humans, involves all three of these. So there are strata and formations constituting the thing, and it is necessary to analyze each of these unities in turn. The problem of presentation of space has here to be faced. Although, according to Husserl, its meaning has never yet been completely grasped, it now appears in clear light, namely by the phenomenological analysis of the essential nature of all the noetic and noetic phenomena, wherein space exhibits itself intuitionally and as the unity of appearances. In the present volume, as is probably proper in an introduction, Husserl is able only to indicate the direction which the investigation must take, and one must look at his other works and those of his disciples to see the analyses carried out in detail. While Husserl worked chiefly in the field of epistemology, his disciples carried the method into axiology and philosophical anthropology. Max Scheler, for instance, or aesthetics, Theodor Lipps, sociology, Karl Mannheim, comparative religion, Rudolf Otto, and ethics, Nikolai Hartmann, not to mention the existentialism of Martin Heidegger and Jean-Paul Sartre. For the ordinary reader, these developments are more interesting and fruitful than pure phenomenology, but that is because it is difficult for most people to exercise themselves about the sheer possibility of knowledge. Husserl's significance as a philosopher is that, like Descartes and Kant, he appeared at a time when the foundations of science were themselves threatened, and irrationalism, skepticism, and nihilism threatened the very nerve of Western civilization. He sought to revive knowledge to make possible once again a rational view of the world and of the human enterprise. He was conscious of being the continuer of a long tradition, and with some reluctance admitted to falling under the classification of idealist. He most resembles Kant, and his work can be summed up as the search for the transcendental conditions which make meaning, scientific, ethical, aesthetic, religious meaning, possible.